Hello, we are so excited to show you our native speech capabilities. Welcome back to the English journey. Today, we are mastering the absolute foundation of social connection, how to talk about yourself. My name's Anna, and I am here to guide you through the phrases and storytelling habits that will make you an engaging communicator using clear, easy English.
And I am Abel. I'm so glad to be here with you, Anna. Whenever someone says those famous words, tell me about yourself, my mind freezes up. I never know whether to talk about my job, my childhood, or what I ate for breakfast. Today, we want to share the simple strategies to present your life story with clarity, warmth, and absolute confidence.
That feeling you described, Abel, that sudden freeze, that blank moment where you cannot find words, is one of the most common experiences for English learners at every single level. And here's something I want you to hear clearly, listener. It's not a language problem. It's a structure problem. When we don't have a clear structure in our mind for how to talk about ourselves, we panic. We either say too little or we say too much. And today, we're going to fix that completely.
That is such a relief to hear, Anna, because I always thought it was just my English. I thought maybe if I knew more words, I would feel more comfortable. But you're saying the issue is different?
Exactly right. Think about it this way. Even in their first language, many people struggle to talk about themselves. They feel shy, or they feel like their life isn't interesting enough, or they simply don't know where to begin. Learning English gives us a beautiful opportunity to practice building that structure from the ground up. And today, that's exactly what we are going to do together.
So where do we start? Because whenever I think about how to introduce myself, I feel like my life is just a big pile of information with no clear beginning or end.
I love that you said that, Abel, because it gives me the perfect way to introduce the very first idea I want to share today. I call it the mosaic metaphor. Now, a mosaic is a type of artwork. If you've ever seen a mosaic, you know it's made from hundreds of tiny, colorful pieces of tile or glass or stone. When you look at the whole picture from a distance, it's breathtaking, it's beautiful and complete. But up close, you're just looking at small stones.
Okay, I understand the image. I love art, so this makes a lot of sense to me. But how does a mosaic connect to talking about myself?
Here's the connection. Your life is like that mosaic. It's made of hundreds of small pieces. Your childhood memories, your education, your job, your friendships, your fears, your dreams, your favorite food, your worst habits. All of those pieces together form the complete picture of who you are. But when you meet someone new, you don't hand them a microscope and ask them to examine every single stone. That would take years. Instead, you pick 3 or 4 of your brightest, most beautiful stones and you hold them up to the light. You let those few stones represent the whole picture.
Oh, that's such a clear way to think about it. So when someone asks me to tell me about myself, I don't need to explain everything. I just choose 3 or 4 things.
Precisely. And those 3 or 4 things should be the parts of your life that feel most alive and most interesting to you right now. Maybe that's your current job. Maybe that's a hobby you're passionate about. Maybe it's the city you grew up in or a big change you recently made in your life. The key word here is choice. You are an artist. You are choosing which stones to show, and that choice itself is an act of confidence.
I really like that. It makes me feel less overwhelmed. But Anna, how do I actually organize those 3 or 4 stones? Like, once I've chosen them, what order do I put them in?
Perfect question, Abel. And that brings us to the second big idea for today. I call it the present, past, future formula. It's a simple, reliable, and extremely powerful structure for introducing yourself in almost any setting, whether you're at a casual dinner party, a job interview, a language exchange, or a first date. This formula works beautifully every single time.
Present, past, future. Okay, that sounds simple. Can you walk me through it?
Of course. The formula works like this. You start with the present. You tell the person what you are doing right now in your life. This could be your job, your studies, where you're living, or a major project you're working on. Starting with the present is powerful because it's immediate and it's relevant. It tells the other person who you are today, not who you were 15 years ago.
That makes sense. Start with now. Okay, and then what?
Then you move to the past. But here's the important part. You don't give a full biography. You give just one sentence or maybe two that explains how you arrived at your present situation. Think of it like a short bridge. You're saying, here's where I am today, and here's the path that brought me here. This gives context without overwhelming the listener.
Can you give me an example? I think I learn better with examples.
Absolutely. Let's imagine someone named Maria. Maria is a graphic designer living in Barcelona. Using the present, past, future formula, she might say something like this. Right now, I'm working as a freelance graphic designer, which I absolutely love. I originally studied journalism, actually, but I discovered my real passion for design through a side project I started during university. And at the moment, I'm really excited because I'm working toward building my own design agency within the next 2 years.
Wow, that was so smooth, and it felt natural, not like a resume. I felt like I learned something real about Maria.
Exactly. And notice what Maria did. She told us her present situation, she gave us a tiny piece of her past, and she shared one forward-looking goal for the future. 3 stones from her mosaic: clear, warm, and memorable. Now let's talk about the future part, because I think it's the most underused piece of this formula.
Why do you say it's underused?
Because most people, when they introduce themselves, talk about what they do and where they're from, and then they stop. They forget to share what they're looking forward to. But sharing a goal or a dream or something you're excited about is incredibly powerful in conversation. It creates energy. It makes people feel your enthusiasm, and it immediately gives the other person something to respond to.
That's true. If someone tells me they're excited about something, I want to ask more questions. I want to know more about that thing.
Exactly right. Enthusiasm is contagious. When you share something you are looking forward to, you're not just giving information, you're giving the other person an emotional invitation to connect with you. And that is the real goal of self-introduction. It's not information transfer, it's connection building.
Anna, I want to bring up something that I'm honestly a little embarrassed about, because I think it connects to this idea of connection. There was this moment at a party, maybe 2 years ago, and someone asked me to tell them about myself, and I got so nervous that I started talking and I could not stop.
Tell me what happened. I have a feeling our listeners are going to relate to this very much.
So I was at this party, a work party, and I did not know many people. Someone came up to me, a very kind woman, and she said, "So, tell me about yourself." And I said, "Well, I work in IT." And then, I don't know why, but I just kept going. I started talking about my job, and then I talked about how stressful my job was, and then I mentioned that the stress was giving me headaches, and then I started explaining the headaches in detail, and I told her about the specific type of headache, which was a tension headache behind my left eye, and then I mentioned that my doctor thought it might be related to my posture, and I told her about the posture exercises my physiotherapist recommended, and by this point, the woman was looking for an exit.
Abel, I am laughing because that is one of the most human stories I've ever heard. And I want every listener to know that what Abel just described has a name. It's called oversharing. And oversharing is something that happens to almost everyone at some point, especially when we're nervous or in an unfamiliar social situation.
It's so embarrassing to think about. But why did it happen? Why do we overshare when we're nervous?
Nervousness creates a strange pressure in conversation. When we feel anxious, our brains sometimes interpret silence as danger. We think, if I stop talking, this will become awkward. So we keep talking to fill the silence. And without a clear structure, our thoughts just tumble out in any order. The headaches lead to the doctor leads to the physiotherapist, and before we know it, we're describing medical details to someone we met 4 minutes ago.
That's exactly what happened. So what is the solution? How do I find the balance between sharing enough and sharing too much?
The solution is what I call the warmth filter. Before you share a piece of personal information in a new conversation, ask yourself one quick question. Does this information bring us closer together, or does it pull the conversation into uncomfortable territory? Medical details, financial problems, deep relationship struggles, these are things that belong in conversations with close friends or family members, not in first introductions. They require trust that hasn't been built yet.
So it's about trust, You share more as the trust grows.
Beautifully said. Conversation is like a garden. You don't plant all your seeds on the first day. You plant a few, you water them, you wait. And as the relationship grows, you plant more. The warmth filter helps you choose seeds that are appropriate for where the relationship is right now. Light, warm, positive pieces of yourself in early conversations. Deeper, more personal pieces later when the trust is established.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. So, what should we talk about in those early conversations? What are the right seeds to plant?
Great question. And this takes us to one of my favorite parts of today's episode, which is talking about hobbies and interests with real passion. Now, I want to ask you something, Abel. If someone at a party asked you about your hobbies, what would you say?
I would probably say something like, I like reading, or I enjoy hiking, something simple like that.
And there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that. It's correct English, it communicates the basic information. But now let me show you the difference between giving information and building connection. Instead of saying, I like reading, what if you said, I'm incredibly passionate about finding old secondhand books because there's something magical about reading a story that dozens of other people have already held in their hands.
Oh, wow, that's completely different. Suddenly, I feel like I want to talk to that person. I want to ask them about their favorite book.
And that's the entire goal. The phrase, I'm incredibly passionate about, is one of the most powerful self-expression tools in English conversation. It signals enthusiasm, it signals depth, and it immediately invites the other person to respond with curiosity. But the real magic happens in the word because. When you add because after describing your interest, you give the other person a window into their inner world. You move from a fact to a feeling.
So instead of stating what I like, I'm explaining why I like it. And the why is the interesting part.
The why is always the interesting part. Facts are easy. Feelings create connection. Let me give you a few more examples so that this really becomes clear. Instead of saying, I enjoy cooking, you might say, I've become completely obsessed with cooking recently because I find it's the one time in my day when I can be completely creative with no rules. Instead of saying, I like traveling, you might say, I'm really passionate about slow travel because I love the feeling of actually living in a place for a few weeks rather than just visiting it.
Each of those sentences tells me so much more about the person, and I noticed you're using words like obsessed and passionate and I love the feeling of. These are emotional words, not just factual words.
Exactly. Emotional language is connection language. When you use words that describe how something makes you feel, you're giving people a reason to relate to you. Because even if someone has never traveled the way you have or read the books you read, they understand the feeling of being passionate about something. Feelings are universal, even when experiences are different.
Anna, there's another thing I struggle with. After I tell someone about myself, I never know what to do next. The conversation sometimes just stops, like there's a silence, and we both look at each other and I panic.
You've just described the exact problem that the bridge technique solves. The bridge technique is a conversational strategy that transforms a one-sided introduction into a real two-way dialogue, and it's beautifully simple. After you share something about yourself, you build a bridge to the other person by asking a natural follow-up question that connects to what you just said.
Can you show me how that works in practice?
Of course. So imagine you have just said, I am incredibly passionate about hiking because it helps me clear my mind after a stressful week at work. Instead of stopping there and waiting in silence, you immediately build the bridge. You say something like, what about you? Do you have anything you do to switch off after work? And just like that, the conversation is alive again. The other person is now sharing their world and you are listening, and the connection is growing.
Oh, that is so smart. So the bridge is just a question that connects to what I just said and invites the other person to share something too.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about the bridge technique is that it shows emotional intelligence. When you ask someone a genuine question about their experience, you are communicating, I am not just here to talk about myself. I am here because I am genuinely curious about you. And people feel that. They feel it deeply. It makes them feel valued, and they will remember you as someone who was truly present in the conversation.
I think that is one of the most important things you have said today, Anna. That self-introduction is not just about broadcasting information about yourself, it's actually about creating a two-way exchange.
You have understood it perfectly. Now, I want to spend some time on something that many of our listeners will face in professional or semi-professional settings, and that is how to talk about your career or your study path in a way that feels natural and human, not like you're reading a list of bullet points from a document.
Oh, yes, I've made that mistake before. In job interviews or even when meeting colleagues, I sometimes just list my qualifications one by one, and it sounds so dry, like a robot reading a file.
And the reason it sounds dry is because lists remove the human element. They give facts without feeling. So instead of saying, I studied computer science, then I did an internship at a software company, then I got a junior developer position, and then I moved into senior development, you tell a story. You find the thread that connects those experiences, and you share that thread.
How do I find the thread?
The thread is usually a moment of discovery, a challenge you overcame, or a turning point that changed your direction. For example, instead of listing your career steps, you might say, I originally started studying engineering because my father was an engineer, and it felt like the obvious path. But during my second year, I took an optional class in user experience design, and something just clicked for me. I realized I was more excited about how people interact with technology than about building the technology itself. So I made a shift, and that shift eventually led me to where I am today.
That version has a story inside it. There's a moment of realization. There's a small conflict between what was expected and what was discovered. That makes it so much more interesting than a list.
And it takes almost the same amount of time to tell. That's the important thing. You're not adding length, you're adding depth. A list of 5 facts takes 30 seconds to hear and 5 seconds to forget. A small story with a turning point takes 30 seconds to hear and stays with the listener for a much longer time.
Anna, you mentioned something earlier that I want to go back to. You mentioned vulnerability, and I remember you said something about micro-stories. I want to understand that more, because the word vulnerability scares me a little in conversation.
That's such an honest thing to say, and I appreciate it. Let me explain what I mean by a vulnerable micro-story, because it's not as scary as it sounds. A vulnerable micro-story is simply a tiny, harmless, funny, or honest admission of an imperfection, something that makes you real, something that makes you human. It's not about sharing deep pain or serious struggles. It's about admitting a small, relatable flaw.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Of course, imagine you're at a dinner party and someone is talking about cooking. You might say, I have to be honest, I'm probably the worst cook you'll ever meet. Last week, I managed to burn water. I don't even know how that's physically possible. A tiny story like that does 3 things instantly. It makes laugh, it makes you relatable because many people feel they are not good at something, and it breaks the social formality that can make conversations feel stiff and uncomfortable.
That's so true. When someone admits something funny or small about themselves, I immediately feel more relaxed around them. I feel like I can be myself, too.
That's called reciprocal vulnerability. When one person shares something honest and a little imperfect about themselves, it gives the other person permission to do the same. It lowers the social walls between people. And in English conversations specifically, this is incredibly valuable because language learners often feel a pressure to sound perfect. But sounding perfect actually creates distance. Being genuine creates connection.
So making a small joke about being a bad cook is actually a social skill. It's not just being funny, it's actively creating a safer space for the other person.
Beautifully articulated, Abel. And here's the deeper truth underneath all of this. When people ask you to tell me about yourself, they're not asking you for a complete and perfect biography. They're asking for an opening. They're holding out their hand and saying, help me find a reason to connect with you. Help me find something we share, something I can relate to, something that makes me feel less alone in a room full of strangers.
That completely changes how I think about self-introduction. It's not a performance, it's an invitation.
Exactly that. It's an invitation. And when you understand that, the pressure shifts completely. You're no longer trying to impress anyone. You are simply trying to connect. And connection doesn't require perfection. Connection requires authenticity. It requires choosing your 3 or 4 bright stones from your mosaic with intention. It requires using the present, past, future formula to give your story shape and clarity. It requires the warmth filter to protect your boundaries while remaining warm and open. It requires talking about your passions with real feeling and real language. It requires the bridge technique to make the conversation flow in both directions. And sometimes it simply requires the courage to say something small and honest and human about yourself.
I feel like I've been given a complete toolkit today. I have the mosaic, the formula, the filter, the bridge, the micro story, and above everything, I have a new understanding of why self-introduction matters. It's not about talking at someone, it's about talking with someone.
And that distinction between talking at and talking with is the most important English conversation lesson I can ever offer you. Language is not a wall between you and other people, it's a bridge. And today, you have learned exactly how to build it, one honest, warm, and carefully chosen stone at a time.
To every single listener who has joined us on the English journey today, I want you to know that your story is worth telling. Your life, your passions, your path, your imperfections, all of it is interesting to someone who has simply not met you yet.
And the most powerful thing you can do the next time someone says, "Tell me about yourself," is to take one calm breath, remember your mosaic, choose your brightest stones, and trust that being genuinely yourself in any language is always more than enough.